My name is Steve Zamborski. I'm the technical manager at NAPCO, and today we're going to be applying our new Kitchen Renew Satin Clear Countertop coating over Flintstone. We're going to be simulating refinishing of a countertop by taking an inlay we've cut into 3 pieces and cleaning them, applying epoxy primer to all of them, and then Flintstone to all of them. The reason why it's cut into 3 pieces is that we are applying our new Kitchen Renew Satin Clear for countertops over the 3 pieces at 3 different intervals so you can see the difference. We'll apply the first one wet on wet, almost immediately after the Flintstone has been applied. The second piece will apply after the Flintstone has dried for 1 hour, and the third piece we will apply after it's dried overnight. Notice that we have an inlay sheet since we don't have a countertop here. This has been cleaned with solvent and cut into 3 pieces, but since you would normally have a countertop, you just want to make sure that any sort of surface defects are repaired. If you have any silicone caulk, you want to make sure that that's removed and that it's cleaned and degreased properly prior to applying the primer. After cleaning, we will apply 2 coats of our spray-on epoxy primer. This is our 1-to-1 catalyzed version, sold in either white or gray. We will apply the first coat as a very light tack coat, almost as though you're fitting a very sheer glove over a hand. Just very light. And then we wait approximately 5 minutes before we apply the second coat. After applying both coats, you wait 10 to 15 minutes until it's dry to the touch before moving on to the application of the Flintstone. We're using a Summit Gray. It's ready to use right out of the container. The application of the Flintstone, 3 to 4 heavy coats. You wait approximately 3 to 5 minutes in between coats. After the first coat has been applied, you will still see some of the primer that's showing through. I do cross-hatch coats just to make sure that I have sufficient coverage. Make sure that you do it slow and make sure that you have full coverage over the whole countertop. You want to make sure that you're not seeing any primer after you're done with at least 3 heavy coats of the Flintstone. So with the first piece of inlay, we're applying the Kitchen Renew Satin Clear countertop finish wet on wet over the Flintstone, 5 minutes or less after the last coat of the Flintstone has been applied. We're doing cross-hatch patterns, 3 coats. You don't have to wait a long time in between coats, 1 to 2 minutes. The reason why you need a clear coat over the Flintstone, because the Flintstone is a little bit softer and not as durable as the hard clear finish. So a homeowner cannot place objects on it or cook on it or cut on it without marring that surface. The benefits of using the Waterborne is it can be applied wet on wet. That's something that you can't do with our Polyglass 320 or any other solvent-borne product. It has been specifically formulated to apply wet on wet, meaning you don't need to sand, you don't need to wait for the Flintstone to dry at all, and it dries and cures to a nice smooth finish, which saves you time and saves you costs and labor. The second panel that we have is after we've waited 1 hour of the Flintstone to dry. Now, because I've sprayed sufficient coverage of the Flintstone, we shouldn't see any issues at all. It should also dry to a nice smooth finish after these 3 crosshatch coats of the Satin Clear. Note that these coats are applied similarly to wet on wet. Just spray horizontally and then vertically, and you don't need to wait a long time in between coats. 1 to 2 minutes is all that's necessary. Note that you really should not have any air movement. You can turn box fans off or ventilation off after the last coat has been applied. This last panel, we've waited overnight for the Flintstone to dry before applying the 3 coats of the Kitchen Renew Satin Clear for countertops. We're applying them similarly to the other 2 panels, crosshatch pattern, horizontal first and then vertical, and not waiting long in between coats, 1 to 2 minutes. We have sufficient coverage of the Flintstone, but you'll notice a very, very slight increase in gloss after it fully dries in the event that your customer wants to have a slightly glossier finish. From left to right, you're seeing the proper way of applying the epoxy primer, full coverage of the Flintstone, and then the wet-on-wet application of the Kitchen Renew Satin Clear for countertops. The middle panel is after drying the Flintstone for an hour, then applying the clear. Then the last panel is when the Flintstone dries overnight, and then the clear is applied. So notice how there's not a whole lot of difference between the wet on wet and the 1 hour in terms of finish. But you'll notice a slight increase in glossiness with the Flintstone that was dried overnight and then the clear was applied. The reason for this is that there's no interaction between the Flintstone and the countertop clear, so they're drying and curing independently. Alternately, we took a different inlay panel, cut it into 3, but did not provide full coverage of the Flintstone to show what could happen if you don't have enough Flintstone before applying the clear. You'll note the alligatoring effect of the clear grabbing onto the Flintstone and pulling it apart after applying the clear wet on wet and even after 1 hour. But also note that after drying overnight and then applying the satin clear, it looks fine. So if you're unsure about whether or not you provided sufficient coverage of the Flintstone, I'd recommend waiting until the next day before applying the clear. So our 2 main takeaways for ideal finish are: make sure that you have sufficient coverage of the Flintstone prior to applying the clear countertop finish, and also do everything that you can to slow down the drying time of the countertop clear. If you need to remove airflow from the room after the last coat has been applied, turn off any fans and remove the ventilation from the area. Both of these will maximize your chances of success. Have a great finish for you and your customers to enjoy.